Good evening, everybody. Elena Barbera here. Welcome to the Base Mother Show. Tonight, conservatives who used to be Democrats are a vastly and fastly growing group. There are a lot of famous names among them, like RFK Jr., Tulsi Gabbard, and the most famous of all, Donald J. Trump. The reasons for leaving are pretty well known, but we don't know the reasons of the millions of people who've switched their voter registration from D to R over the past 5 years. It's easy enough to speculate between the Biden era's rampant inflation, gender indoctrination of children, illegal alien invasion, the government censorship machine. I mean, there's a reason for everybody to leave. Tonight, I have the chance to do a deep dive with my friend Kevin Hammer, who was at one time an avowed liberal, leftist, maybe even a progressive. We'll see if he uses that term to describe how he was. That's before his before pic on the screen on the left there, and his after pick now. So he went from raging liberal to like approaching Marlboro Man in his look. Kevin and I had met once. We had already after he had made the leap to become an active, vocal conservative. So I didn't know him as a liberal. I want to know what was appealing about the left for him to start, what it was that made him turn to the right. Was it one thing or was it a bunch of things? How was he treated by both sides when he made the switch? And does he regret it? Which of course he doesn't, but I'm going to ask just for fun. All right, let's bring in Kevin and get right to it.
Hey.
Well,
Hey.
Is it the photo that's making you laugh?
It is. I mean, now granted, that photo was actually specifically taken during a photo shoot that I did with a friend who is no longer in my life, by the way, one of the many who have since exited my life. And that outfit was actually part of a costume I wore, like out to the club and stuff like that. Originally for Halloween, but then sometimes just to be out at the club. Yeah, it was a very different world for me back then. So it's always interesting looking back at those photos, and I'm like, wow. I think about a lot. I think about if I could time travel and if I were to engage with the individual I was then, it would be quite an entertaining engagement for sure. It'd be very entertaining.
Let me show you one photo to kick this off, right? And then we're going to get into it. So this is a photo, a screenshot from a post that looks like a Facebook post on December 18th, 2019. This is you screenshotting that you were changing your affiliation to the Republican Party. And I see the Republican Party box checked there. And you said, oh, snap. And this had to be a really big moment in your life that you actually announced, you screenshot it, you announced it, you still have this. So that just shows how big of a shift this was.
Yeah, it really was. And, I know some people be like, well, that's kind of a private, personal, very personal thing to post publicly like that, especially to take a picture of the actual change of registration. And I did it for a few reasons. In part, I did it because I have kind of always been a rip the Band-Aid off person. I can be that. Well, I increasingly became that. Now I'm full on that. I had enough annoyance of dealing because my views started to shift before that. I would say that, interestingly enough, it was in 2017, maybe mid to later 2017, when things started to shift for me. I didn't get to the point where I fully switched parties until 2019. It was definitely more the beginning of 2019 when I really felt it, but it wasn't until December when I was like, okay, I'm doing it. And I posted it because if I was gonna get hate for it, I was like, just bring it. Let's tear that Band-Aid off.
Merry Christmas, everybody.
I know, right? That was my Christmas gift to all the leftists, all the liberals in my life.
Well, so let's go back. Let's go back further than that, right? Let's start, I don't want to go right at the beginning, but, closer to the beginning. Let's say 10 years ago, right? 2015, Kevin, or somewhere around there. You take me Tell me who you were hanging out with, what you were thinking, what you were up to.
Yeah. So 2015 is actually the year that I married my husband. I was still very much in the left mindset. But I go back even further to that though, further than that to college. I did not grow up in a family that was very political. Both my parents, their view of politics, if you were to ask them about politicians in voting, my parents said multiple times, "Why bother? They're all crooked anyways." So I did not, I did not really grow up with in a strongly, politically focused household. My parents were blue collar workers, factory workers. My mother raised on a farm, all that. So they cared about the table, right? Getting food on the table. That was their life. Politics was not.
Without
When
realizing
I went,
how much politics affects that. Yeah, it sounds like.
yeah, I know, but my parents were just, salt of the earth people. They that's what they focused on, their life they're trying to live. Um, Non-shocker, it was when I went to college that I got political. When I fully came out of the closet and I found myself among friends that were very liberal leaning, even left leaning. Mind you, back then we didn't have the term leftist. Really, it wasn't really that much part of the language, part of the vocabulary. At that time, though, was SJW, social justice warrior, was a term that was a bit more common or starting to become common when I entered that realm. And so I did identify as a social justice warrior. It was a very entertaining time. I became co-founder of, at the time, my first college that I went to, I was co-founder of their Gay Straight Alliance. After leaving that and I went to the second college I went to, I was co-president of the one there as well. I got very involved in politics. The first election I ever voted in, even though I could have voted for the prior election, was Obama's first run. I just to give you a little bit of my voting history, I voted for Obama twice. I begrudgingly voted for Hillary. I was not a fan of hers. And then following that, it was Trump. And then Trump. So yeah, it was.
And Trump again, right?
Trump. Yeah. Well, Trump. Yeah. So going back to like 2015 though, it was interesting because when I met my husband's parents, they're Republican, they're conservative, and so there was some friction there. We're gonna get to something you're gonna have me read, and I will go more into detail on an emotional level with that stuff. But the mindset I was in was I saw the oppressor everywhere around me. I had gotten very much involved in the LGBT community. I interned at my local LGBT center. I volunteered there. That was before I met my now husband. And I was very involved. I marched on Washington, D.C. I marched locally at my capital. I met with my representatives. I got very involved as an activist. I volunteered to help organize pride parades. I did all that stuff.
How did you come to realize, I use that word loosely, that you were oppressed?
So what it really was is that I think it was stemming from the fact that I wanted to be able to marry someday. And I think that was the thing, is that I, at the time, because I will admit, when I was younger, I thought like I'd never have any kind of legal protections with a man that I love in my life. So I thought like that was something I'd fight for the next generation. So that was my segue into it. It was also, once it was accomplished, it played a role in my segue out of it.
But I'm just trying to understand, because I didn't have this experience. And there's a difference between saying, I'd like to establish this right in law and feeling oppressed. I think there's two. I think there's,
there is, and so the thing is,
what I'm getting at is like, was this something that somebody convinced you of, or did you come upon it yourself?
Well, the left is very clever in that. It's not so much. I don't know how to explain it. It is, how we always talk about the word grooming, right? And I love having that conversation because that word goes beyond how we apply it today. We often apply it, obviously, with what's happening with youth and everything in America, but it has a broader definition, right? To prepare someone for something, to try to get them prepared, to shift them, to,
Right.
that kind of mindset. And I would say it was a social type of grooming in the sense that I'd hang out with friends, and especially those who were connected to the clubs, the organizations I was part of, and everyone would talk about their fears, right? Their fears of what they want out of life, but they might never get, the bigotry they've experienced, being called, different names, profanity they experienced. So it really was this feeding off from everyone else's. It wasn't just what you experienced, right? Everyone experienced hatred thrown at them. That's one of the things I had to learn when I grew up, right? But it was this idea of you weren't just speaking to your negative experiences in your life that you could connect to your identity. You were absorbing everyone else's around you. It was constant conversations about how the world at large was against you. And over time, those conversations take you further and further into a victim mindset,
Yes.
even not necessarily being aware of it, until one day you get to the point where your victim mindset has driven you to where you actually cut someone out of your life, someone that you love. So it's a slow journey. You probably have heard the saying, like the boiling of the frog, right? If you slowly, turn on that burner and heat up the water, the frog doesn't jump out, but if you quickly do it, they will. I think that's one of the
Exactly,
best ways to describe
exactly
it.
right. It's like literally like an abusive relationship. Like it doesn't start like the heat of the worst of the relationship doesn't happen in the first week. It's
No.
gradual until you kind of get used to it and you get into a habit of justifying and moving and making
Yeah.
excuses until all of a sudden one day you wake up and you go, wait a minute, how did I get here?
Yeah.
If you're lucky enough to wake up at all. Yeah, it's grooming. It's a, we all do that. That victim mentality, what I see on the left is a lot of quite frankly, making mountains out of molehills. I'm not saying in this case of marriage rights. I'm saying in general around any sort of victim mentality. I can speak to the Me Too movement when all these women came out. This guy brushed up against me on the subway. Like it was probably an accident, in half of these
Yeah.
cases. And now you're saying you were sexually harassed, or somebody asked you for coffee at work and you were sexually harassed.
Hmm.
No, it was just, everything. Everybody wanted to be a victim in the past 10 years in America. It became very in style to be a victim.
Yeah.
And if you weren't, you were labeled as insensitive and just a Nazi goon couldn't feel anything. And I would see people who I personally had the same or worse experiences than, and I didn't complain and I didn't see myself as a victim. And I saw them saying things like that to me, like, well, what do you know? And I'd be like,
Yeah.
oh, just because I process this differently doesn't mean, you know what I mean? Like, I'm
Yeah.
a bad guy. And that's something that I'm really happy for you that you were able to escape. So maybe we can forward to that one post that you had put up on Facebook in 2016, I believe. And this
Oh,
is long before the switch. And if you could read it, I'd love to hear it coming out of in your
all
own voice,
right.
because it is really fitting for this victimhood conversation.
Yeah. So this is a post I made to Facebook on September 28th, 2016. I am completely sick of Trump supporters trying to convince me that he will not go after the LGBTQ community. He has made numerous promises to conservative organizations regarding stripping my community of the rights it fought so hard for. He has hired numerous bigots to work on his campaign and has promised to do his best to appoint Supreme Court justices that will hopefully one day find themselves ruling on a case that will undo everything we have accomplished. No, this is not paranoia. This is fact and can be proven by doing even the simplest research. You cannot honestly say you love me and then ask me to vote for someone who has promised to strip me of my rights. If you're a woman, would you vote for a candidate who has promised to put you back in the home with nothing more to do than to pop out babies and cook? I think not. Besides, anyone who argues that Trump isn't a sexist is delusional, just as anyone who argues that Trump doesn't support racism is blind. I will vote for a man who is literally running on a party platform that currently says that, that I should be able to marry and have a family. So, yeah.
Wow. Wow. That's a lot of things. So anti-gay, sexist, racist. I'm sure I'm forgetting something. I mean, you really piled it all in there. All the things that you also piled in. All you have to do is some simple research and find this out, and maybe you'll stumble upon a Southern Poverty Law Center, fake news article, opinion piece, and that'll prove everything, right?
Yeah.
Because you couldn't have found proof of any of the things you said because they didn't exist.
The interesting thing, though, is that they proved, I mean, what was considered proof then, right, was associations with individuals who had differing viewpoints, right? Like Mike Pence was a huge reference during that time, and Mike Pence's views, obviously, on same-sex marriage and so many other things. So that was the proof that circulated among the left. And that always is the proof. What's at the surface, that's the proof. As far as looking into the man himself, Donald Trump, that really wasn't what you were going to do. It was a game of, first of all, guilty by association.
Yeah.
So and it was reading into things, every little thing you could. And it's interesting because after that, I actually cut a family member out of my life when she voted for Trump. And this is an individual. She's my baby cousin, one of my baby cousins. I was 4 years old when she was born. I was there the night she was born, held her in my arms, even when I was that young. And I proceeded to, because of the fear that had consumed me and the victim mindset that I was trapped in, I cut her out of my life for a while. I am happy to report that, thank the Lord, I was able to mend that relationship. And the irony now is I'm actually leaps and bounds more conservative than she is. So it's and she even points that out when we talk about it from time to time. She's like, you are so far more conservative than I am, and she goes, it's actually quite amusing, given that you cut me out of your life for voting for Trump.
That, first of all, that's hilarious, and I love it. But how did that happen? Take us to where did the cracks in the foundation or start to happen for you?
So I think it's a multitude of things in my case. A lot of people who are on the left, they are fond of saying, I didn't leave the left left me. And I mean, while that's true to a degree, for me, it was a much more complex thing. I actually was raised with more conservative values. While my parents weren't political, they were conservative. If I were to look at all their values and assign them a political party, a political leaning, it would have been conservative. I was raised, I actually was very no sex into marriage. I didn't try alcohol until I didn't knowingly try alcohol, and put it that way, until I was 21. I was very some of my family members would have called me uptight for a long time. And I was very reserved until my early 20s. Then I went to college. I met my first boyfriend at the time. I got involved in the activism, and it shifted. And it wasn't that I changed my views on a lot of those things. I suppressed them. Like I never was anti-gun. I'm actually far more pro Second Amendment than I was then, because there was some, gun legislation that I would be like, okay, I can compromise on that. I can see that. That's changed, but I was never like anti-gun. I was never, let's flood the country with illegals. I was never any of that. Those
weren't ideas that were implanted in the left. They weren't told that they needed to believe those things that far back.
Yeah, exactly. So what's interesting enough is it's like I said, it's two things. As the left started to shift further left, right? Those new values they were embracing, those new positions, started to conflict with ones that, in the name of my activism for the LGBT community, I had suppressed. But once those started to conflict more and more, it started to aggravate me more and more. And I started to conflict with my friends on the left more and more. I remember a few things. There were a few moments that really shifted for me, my view on a few things, if you don't mind me talking about them a little bit.
Oh, I asked the
Um,
question. I want
yeah,
to know.
yeah.
These are the moments that I want to hear that explain what,
Yeah.
where these shifts happen for you,
Yep.
where the
So
breaks.
so there was an event called the Northeastern LGBT Conference. I think it still goes on, but I remember it being very big when I was in college, and we actually once took a college field trip to attend it. But when I went to one of them, this is about the issue of abortion, by the way, because I actually once considered myself pro-choice, and I am now on.
Oh, I know you you and I have become friends, and that,
I know, right? You can't picture that because I am
I
so on.
pro-choice. I guess I was once pro-choice too.
I am
Anyway,
so unapologetically pro-life. I am absolutely okay. Since I'm now so pro-life, I'm okay if you call me anti-abortion, because that's correct. And you can call me an abolitionist when it comes to abortion. I'll accept that title as well. But the thing is, at the time, let me explain. In the community, the LGBT, the alphabet community, there, feminism had really gotten its claws in, and basically, as a homosexual man, one of the things that was expressed to you, well, you know what it's like for laws, right, to restrict your freedoms and what you can do with your body. So why wouldn't you be against laws for, that restrict women's bodies? Now, at one of these conferences that I went to, which, by the way, were complete leftist, propaganda, I actually happened to sit down, and while I was having lunch, a man sat next to me, and it turned out that man was a gay conservative. And I don't even remember how we got on the issue of abortion. I genuinely don't, but I'll always remember what he said to me. Because I said, I brought up that argument. What I had been taught pretty much is, well, as gay men, we know what it's like to have government tell us what we can do with our bodies and all that stuff. And he said to me, he goes, I got a question for you. He goes, I got a question for you. The morality of homosexuality aside, that conversation, for you to be intimate with another consenting man, does that require the ending of a human life? And when he phrased it like that, it planted a seed. Now, that seed wouldn't fully sprout until much later, because I was raised very pro-life. There's an earlier story with that. I actually when I was about 11 years old, I had a sister who was thinking about getting an abortion, and I didn't know what that was at that time until my parents explained it to me. So I went to the local library and printed off pictures of abortions to try to convince her not to have an abortion.
wow.
And so it was interesting then, because then I became pro-choice. And then I had that interaction with that man, that gay conservative, and he planted that seed that sprouted and helped lead me to where I'm now unapologetically pro-life. And another experience that really cemented that for me was I have a cousin. She was pregnant. She was expecting a baby boy. And a week had gone by and she hadn't felt the baby move. She went to the hospital and found out, she was 8 months along. She found out that she had a miscarriage. And, excuse me. And the thing is, on the day that was supposed to be her baby shower, she went into the hospital to have her son's body removed from her.
Yeah.
And she wanted to see him. So after they did the surgery, me and my now husband, we were at the hospital. I was in the room with her. She and I grew up like brother and sister. This isn't the one I cut off, by the way. But she and I had grown up like brother and sister. She had lived with me for a bit growing up. And I remember being in the hospital room with her, and they brought the baby in. They brought her son's body in, and she wanted to hold him. So the nurse picked him up and put him in her arms. And while we were there, standing there, my cousin, her stitches started bothering her, so she needed to adjust herself. The nurse had left the room. She asked me if I could hold him while she adjusted herself in the hospital bed. So I said, of course, because I wanted to be supportive and stuff, and I took him in my arms. And I don't know how to explain this. It some people might even try to accuse me of over dramatizing, but I can say that there was a shift in my soul to hold a baby in my arms that had no life in it. It's an experience that I cannot explain, because if anything is supposed to have life in it, if anything is supposed to have boundless, endless life in it, it's a baby. It's a baby. So to hold a baby in your arms that isn't crying, that isn't cooing, that isn't making any kind of noise, that isn't throwing up on you, that isn't shifting or doing anything, it shifted something so deep in me that even to this day, I can't fully describe it to anyone when I talk about it, because I feel like there's genuinely no words to explain that. And then I realized that he was 8 months along. She was 8 months along, and that there are states where that's permitted for a woman, her choice, to
Yes.
kill that baby at 8 months. And making that connection in my head really started to shift for me on that issue specifically, which created later conflicts in my life. But so the pro-life thing was one of that was one of the first things where I really shifted and started to conflict more with the left. Second Amendment came. One of the next big things that came was actually religion, believe it or not. That was interesting after, especially after the Pulse nightclub shootings.
Yeah.
I had made so many posts over the years criticizing Christians, just tearing into Christians, right? About how they're anti-gay and all this stuff, right? Well, I decided to make a post about how Islam treated homosexuals and homosexuals, trans, all that stuff, right? Those same friends that liked, loved, and shared my post about Christians came flooding saying, you can't say that. You can't say that. I'm like, why? Are you trying to tell me that Islam loves gays, that it treats us well or something? And I'm like, why can't I criticize? It's an idea, it's a religion that has a specific view, and I'm criticizing them just as I have criticized Christianity so many times. And they were like, well, you can't, because that's punching down their victims. That punching down became one of the
Oh,
terms
dear
that
Lord.
yeah, that terminology. Anyway, so I actually lost some friends with that. I kept the post up. I didn't remove it. But that was one of the shifts was when I made a post criticizing Islam. All those friends that cheered me on when I was criticizing Christianity, oh, they were so quick to turn against me. They were so quick to try to put me in my place. And here's one thing that has always remained true to my personality and my parents. It was one of the banes of their existence with me. Was I was always a very stubborn child. And as I got older, when people who tried to put me in my place, I did not respond well to it. So I think that was inevitably what also really was going to cause me to lead the left, was I didn't have a personality that responded well to being put in my place. So when the left tried to put me in my place, it didn't go well. I think
Right. Because they just talk down to people who disagree with them, and they berate. They don't know how to have a persuasive conversation.
Yeah.
They do in the sales cycle part, in the sales part of the liberal cycle, when they're grooming, they can be persuasive and emotional but you're not disagreeing at that point. You're just taking it in and going, no, I didn't know that. Oh, I didn't know that. Oh, wow, I can't believe all these horrible things that are happening. But then once you start asking tough questions, they get immediately combative. I just want to back up to what you said when first of all, that experience with your cousin in the hospital is obviously really profound. And so I don't think you're over dramatizing when you say that it had a profound effect on you and you felt it in your soul. And towards the end of that story, you said, one of the next issues that made a shift for you was religion. And, while you were telling the story about holding that baby and being changed by it, I do believe that that's God sending you a message. When you feel something that deeply, it is from God, a shift in how you see the world. And then, and one of the next things that happened shortly down the road is that door also became visible to you. It was there all along. And, you started that shift and that brought you here. That's cool. And just one more thing. As I saw this great meme today, and it said, if you hate Christian nationalism, just wait till you try Muslim nationalism.
Yeah, that's on point. That is incredibly on point. And can I tell one more story about that when it comes to Islam, right?
How about it?
When Trump was elected, right, there were a bunch of anti-inauguration marches and all that stuff, right? When he was sworn in, and I remember I attended the one in New York at the Capitol, and marched with them, and all that stuff, and it was a big event, big to do, all that. Now, here's the thing: what demographic do you think took center stage during that? Do you think it was LGBTQ? Even that at the point? No. One of the talking points, the focus was Muslims, right? And I remember when I was marching in one of the marches, because there were a few I attended. One of the women that was holding one of the banners, she asked me if I could take over. She was an older woman. I was like, okay, yeah. And I'm holding this banner, and as I'm walking, like I said, I'm going to talk about things that shifted me. I looked down when we got to where we were supposed to go, right? And we were standing still because they were going to do speeches and all that stuff at the Capitol. And here I am, a homosexual man, and I'm holding a banner that is defending Islam. And it was one of those things that there was a shift there. Was it a dramatic shift where I threw the banner down and what? No, it was a shift that afterwards I couldn't escape it. It just stayed in my head.
Chickens for KFC guy for a minute.
The thing is, I wouldn't say I was that, because I never held a banner like that. Like I said,
maybe not on the inside, but for a second.
Not right? On the second, and that was the thing. When I did it, even for that maybe block and a half, it felt so wrong. I felt it in my soul. At the time I would have described it, I felt it in my core that it was wrong. But now I know I felt that it was wrong in my soul. To be there holding that banner, touching that banner, being anywhere near that banner. And that was one of those shifts for me. And it makes me think of another shift that I had. Do you remember, it was shortly after Trump got elected, there was a young man who he was I forget if he was autistic. He actually was kidnapped in Chicago by one of his friends and 3 other people. All 4 happened to be black, and he was white. And they tortured him and video streamed it, and it went viral throughout America. They were using racial slurs towards him, mentioning Trump, all that stuff. So this happened in Chicago, and it was I believe it was early 2017, and it shifted because, to me, one thing where I was genuine, when I said I was against bigotry, I was against it always, right? I always did believe that much. Even when I was at my most leftist, I actually still believed, for example, it was wrong to be sexist towards women, but it was wrong to be sexist towards men. It was wrong to be racist towards black people, but it was also wrong to be racist towards white people. So I remember, once again, I made a post. I went to social media and I'm saying, we need to call out this act of racism, right? These 4 black individuals kidnapped this white guy, tortured him, videoed it, and put it on social media, the way they were torturing him and everything, and calling him using racial slurs and all that stuff, right? So I made that post calling out the act of racism. And what do you think happened? Oh, black people can't be racist. All this. And I was like, full. I was like, by the definition, the word racism, right? You can use different types of racism. You can say institutionalized, systemic, whatever you want. But at its base, the basic definition of racism is a prejudice based on race, because that became a very big talking point for me, because I would often hear, well, black people can't be racist, but they can be prejudiced. And I'm like, but racism is a prejudice based on race. Therefore, if they're prejudiced based on race, they are racist.
They will say anything. Like the mental gymnastics that they do to justify hating white people is just astonishing.
Yeah, it's insane. And that was another conflicting. Each time I lost a few more friends, I lost, and I eventually lost some big ones. I don't know if you have any of those screenshots, but one of them, a few of them, I lost a friend of 20 plus years, someone I went to high school with. I lost that friend over abortion. I lost a friend of 15 plus years. She was actually my best woman at my wedding. I lost a close friend. That friendship was probably more like, it was over 5 years. It was between 5 to 10 years.
Yeah, very close to 5 years. Yeah.
Yeah. So we were very close friends. I mean, we had laughed together, cried together. We had, hung out all the time, been there for each other during sad moments, all that stuff. He was actually one of the people, right, when I changed my party affiliation in 2019, he was like, what? He actually messaged me, what is this?
Well, let me read one of the text exchanges that you sent me that was yours. And this person said, I have begun seeing some what I consider pro-Trump, in all caps, talking points on your page, and I will defriend you faster than you can say jackrabbit. You apparently are very non-LGBT. This so dates itself because there's no QIA plus. So apparently very non-LGBT supportive, because every remark you make against the leftists or liberals, you put one more notch in evil Trump's belt. If you, again, in all caps, do not vote Democrat, consider me no longer your ally on Facebook. Just defriend me first.
So
wait. Should I finish, or do you want to?
Yeah. No, finish.
Then and I think this was a decently worded, calm response. Then unfriend me if you feel it's what you need to do. It's unfortunate that you see those who do not share your views as people you cannot be friends with, but you do not. But you need to do you, my man. Also, no real friend would actually demand that someone change their values to keep a friendship going. So again, you do you. Now, one more response from him. This is where I say, good riddance. Smug little gay whack job. You're getting defriended. I have gay friends who are real men, all caps, who don't support this piece of shit in the White House. I see where your kiss ass loyalties lies. Defriending Mr. Hammer.
Oh, the memories. The memories. So, I mean, that was one of the most dramatic out of the messages that I received, and I received a number of them, but that one was especially memorable, which is why I screenshotted it and saved it, because I was like, wow. I think it was my first one that was, but prior to that, I'd gotten some like, oh, I can't believe you type of things and, whatever, but that was the most detailed one at that time that I had received. I received
a whack job. Like,
yeah,
what?
and that was in 2020. I think it was early 2020, if I remember correctly. It was, and yeah, I had started making posts about how I was supporting Trump, and it definitely ruffled a number of feathers. And for him, it basically plucked him, I guess, because he went off in that Facebook message, and he was just the first of many to really come at me in such a fashion. And it was interesting though, because It gave me perspective. Actually, I wouldn't say, oh, I wish it had never happened. I'm not someone who really dwells on regret, because I've developed the mindset, the view that good or bad, everything that happened in my life was meant to happen for a reason, and it's put me on the path to where I am today. What I've gotten today, whether it be my family, the blessing that is my husband, my growing relationship with God as I'm taking my spiritual journey as well. And working on a relationship with Christ and all that stuff. So I have no regrets. I wouldn't say that it's a regret. I have things that I find entertaining about it, but those interactions I found interesting because it gave me a perspective to my cousin that I had previously cut out of my life, right? That I had done that to someone. It gave me that perspective and allowed me to even have better conversations with her, to really discuss that. Because I mean, experiencing something like that was interesting. And I do want to say though, it's not that I never had any conflicts as I shifted to the right. And even today I like to say that at the end of the day I vote my values. I actually recently talked about how, if I didn't live in a state that had closed primaries, I'd probably be a registered independent. Yeah, I'd be unaffiliated, just because I really do vote my values. They just so happen to align with the Republican candidate in my state. I would say the conservative candidate, but in New York State, for those who don't know, the Conservative Party regularly endorses Democrats. And I do mean regularly. You can look this up and confirm it easily. For some reason, the conservatives in our state regularly, and I mean regularly, endorse Democrats over Republicans. It's pretty consistent. I even, during one of my campaigns as a Republican, I experienced it. So it's a bit of a that, but yeah. Now you think, right? Conservatives are supposed to be, the Conservative Party was made because the Republicans weren't conservative enough. Yet now you have these conservatives endorsing Democrats.
Oh, I don't think they're really conservatives. They're conservatives. They're the sheep in wolf's clothing thing. They're just Democrats they're plants. It sounds like.
Yeah, absolutely. Like it's incredibly insane, but you know, and I've had my conflicts. I'm not going to pretend like, everything has been ironically rainbows, bunnies, and puppies and kittens on the right. I've had my conflicts.
Yep.
I've had interactions, engagements with people who, it doesn't matter how pro-life I am. It doesn't matter how pro Second Amendment I am. It doesn't matter how much I love the Constitution, or even the fact that I'm now an American nationalist, and I say that very openly and proudly. I believe that the founding principles of our nation are superior to the founding principles of any other nation right now in existence. So I'm very much conservative, very firmly conservative. But to some people, the fact that I'm a homosexual man, that wipes all that out. And that's not me saying boo hoo. I acknowledge that's their right to feel that way. I'm not going to call them monsters. I'm not going to call them little Hitlers or anything like that. That's their right to feel that way. That's one of the amazing things about America, is that freedom of expression, freedom of speech, and one of the amazing things about being a child of God is free will. So I'm not going to criticize them for having that view. I would discuss it and disagree with them, absolutely, if someone wanted to have that discussion. But I'm not going to villainize them for having that view. And I think that's the main shift one of the main shifts that I've had in my journey from the left to the right is I take a lot less to heart than I used to.
Well, you're not a
back in
victim
the day.
anymore. You're not a victim anymore. And that's just the thing, that like sometimes people not liking you or not understanding you, or not being interested in you, that's just part of being a human being. And we understand that when you're a victim, all those things become all you can see is
Absolutely.
the person. Sometimes people harm us, like, not just by being absent-minded. I can be like a bull in a china shop, like not not realizing that somebody else is feeling different about something we're doing, together even. And I don't mean any harm. And,
Mm.
the average person will just not think anything of it. And somebody else will turn themselves into, this whole thing that they have to talk to their therapist about. And that's the left is really big on using the word trauma to describe every bad experience that they don't like.
That was another thing, by the way, that was a shift for me. Is I would look into these surveys of asking how much if you've experienced homophobia and stuff like that, right? And it would be these surveys, the questions or the replies would be, because I actually took part in some locally, people would describe experiencing vicious homophobia as someone calling them a name randomly from a car or something. And I was like, what? I had a friend who was gay bashed, who was beaten. I actually met a man when I was volunteering at the Pride Center. There was um one of the things they offered was a program that actually assisted people escaping persecution from countries such as in the Middle East. And I had met a man who, his experience, when he told me his story, ironically, his story helped shift me to the right. It helped shift me out of the victimhood mindset. And once I tell you his story, you'll definitely see why. Uh, I forget exactly where he was from in the Middle East, but I remember these details of his story like I was hearing them just yesterday. And he was a weatherman in his home country. He worked for a news station, and apparently it was found out that he's homosexual. And after work one night, when he was walking home and he had left work, a group of men attacked him. They stabbed him. They actually set him on fire and left him to die. He survived all that. He somehow survived all that and managed to find a way to make it to America. So when I heard his story, talk about something that will also put things in perspective. So to hear his story, and then the next day hear someone tell me a story about how they think the waiter that waited on them was rude because they're homophobic, I was like, are you effing kidding? It put me one of those shifts. It was one of those shifts in the soul where I was like, what the heck am I supporting? What the heck am I doing?
Right.
I'm comparing being called a slur to what this man went through. No, 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 that's wrong. That is wrong.
Yeah.
And it was really one of those defining moments for me as well. It really was.
That's yeah, and that's just a level of maturity that I think you can impart on children. Children can understand things like that. The thing about the waiter being rude to you, sometimes the waiter doesn't say anything. The waiter's having a bad day. It has nothing to do with you. And the victim mentality will make you assume it's because you're gay or you're a woman or whatever victim mentality lens you're in the mood to look through. I remember one time my son was about 10. And this is a perfect example of how you can teach children perspective at any age. At 9 or 10, and he comes out of his bedroom and he's holding his pair of socks. It's in the morning. And he goes, Mom, none of my favorite socks are in my drawer. Where are my good socks? Like, talk about like first world, right? And I looked at him and I said, listen, I just checked the news. We were leaving for the morning, and it was that morning that there was a terrorist attack on a Starbucks in Australia. We woke up to the news,
Mm.
and like 4 or 5 people were murdered in this Starbucks, and one of them was a mother. I think she had 2 children. It's a long time ago. And I said to him, I said, I'm a psycho. Like the kid was like 10. And I was like, listen, the news just came out. There was in Australia, these people were just going to get their morning coffee on the way to work.
Mm.
And a lunatic came in the guy waving that ISIS flag, and he shot a bunch of people, and one of those people was a mother, and who is never going to get to see her children again, and her children now have to live without a mother, and you're
Mm.
complaining about your socks. And he literally just said, sorry, I won't complain about the socks. And that was, a harsh way to teach a child, but he stopped complaining about stupid little things. And that, unfortunately, what the left does is they train up victims, and nobody ever says something like that to
Mhm.
them. And when they hear that story about that other guy, they still make it about themselves. Yeah, but you don't know how it feels to be me. This is trauma.
Yep.
This is trauma. Like, you can't, like,
Mhm.
when they talk about illegal aliens being deported, and I tell them about Jocelyn Nungray, they don't care. That little
Yeah.
girl got raped and murdered at 12 years old by 2 illegal aliens, and they don't care. She's dead. She doesn't
Mhm.
have a chance to start a new life in her home country, or maybe come back in the front door. She doesn't get any more chances. They
Mm.
can't see past whatever they want to see. But your story tells me that there is a way out for some
Yeah.
people. And, I think it sounds like you
Yeah.
started solid, you got lost for a little while, and then you came back.
It really has to be an experience, I think, that shifts at your core, that conflict. There has to be an experience that doesn't just aggravate you. It has to violate a core aspect of who you are. It has to come into conflict with a core aspect of who you are to shake you well enough. And that's going to be different for everyone. The experiences I had that shifted that for me are going to be very different from other people, right? It's very interesting because I had that experience where, to me, when I saw that young man and that man in Chicago, right, kidnapped and beaten and stuff, that was that hit me. That really hit me. I was like, look at this act of vicious, brutal racism. It really struck at my core. But for so many others on the left, it meant nothing, right?
Because
Because
your value was to fight racism, period.
exactly, racism was
It doesn't
wrong.
matter who it's on.
Racism is wrong.
Right. And then you weren't allowed to fight that kind of racism.
Yeah, exactly. And that actually, I know I talked with you about this. I talked with Chris Barrett, our good friend, all the time about this. Is where I've come to in my life is I seek logical consistency. If I have a value, if I have a perspective, I want to see how broadly I can apply it. And if I can't apply it across the board, I have to ask myself, why can't I? Can I justify be only applying it in certain places? And if I can't, maybe it's a value I need to think about. I need to rethink it. And that is where I am. I seek logical consistency. So when I was told that, you can only be racist towards people of color, right? When I was told you can only be sexist towards, women, when I was told you can only hate someone, true hatred based on sexual orientation towards homosexuals or bisexuals, right? When I was told that all this hate only goes in one direction, it conflicted so deeply in me, in my desire for consistency in my logic, in my values, and how I apply them, that it shifted me in a way that definitely meant that I was going to eventually leave the left. There was no other path for me. It was a painful path, absolutely. It took some time, and it was a journey. It was kind of like, okay, I'm no longer a leftist. I'm no longer a social justice warrior. I'm a classical liberal. Okay, I'm a libertarian. This was a journey for me, right? And it's funny
Right. Oh,
because
I'm so glad you said that, because I'm sitting here thinking, okay, but where you didn't just jump into conservatism. Like, you have to first, break up over here, and then kind of be single for a little bit, I
yeah,
imagine, trying to figure out, where you're going. All right.
and I even once was registered for, like, I think it was less than a year, as a member of the Green Party or something like that. I was all over. I was out there, ironically experimenting, politically speaking, and I was having so many interesting conversations. And I was really excited when I got back in touch with that cousin that I had cut out of my life, because that was an amazing conversation. But one of the conversation I had resonates with me to this day, and I think about this man often. So as I was on my journey, I started making friends with homosexuals who happen to be conservative, right? With other homosexual men that were conservative. And one of them, at the time, I was identifying, I think, as politically speaking, as a classical liberal, right? I was trying to say I'm a classical liberal. Before then, by the way, was Blue Dog Democrat, which those are extinct. But so then it was like classical liberal. It was interesting. And while I was doing that, this one guy we ended up in a message exchange, and he and I argued a lot. And he goes, you know what? During one of our back and forths, he goes, you know what I see for you? And I'm like, what? He goes, I know you're I know you're saying you're a classical liberal. You can say you're libertarian, whatever, right? He goes, but you know what I see for your future? He goes, I think in a couple of years, you're not only going to come out as a conservative, you're going to end up being one of the strongest conservatives in in your circle. And so he goes, I think you are going to be a strong conservative. And I remember saying, oh, you're just full of it and all that stuff. So it's interesting, because I still think to this day, what exactly, he left social media, and he wasn't someone that I knew personally. So, we lost touch. But I still think to this day, about what he saw in me during that time, that he was like, that man is not just going to be conservative, he's going to be a strong conservative. And he was right. And I still think about that conversation from time to time, especially this day and age, where I'm a gay Nazi. I'm so many things. It's always entertaining. So I think about that man often, and when he said that to me.
It's too bad. I hope he pops back up in your life and you can, ask him that question. What made you say that? I mean, you were clearly right, but curious. He knew, he could see the path that you were on.
He saw something in me that I had not seen yet. Looking back, obviously I can, hindsight is 20/20, so I can see a little bit more. But during that specific time, I remember feeling completely comfortable in that classical liberal, area, right? That part of my life. So I do still wonder, maybe it was because where I did have two stronger leanings at the time was where my pro-life views were coming into shape, and my pro-Second Amendment views were pretty strong then. I don't know if maybe in those he saw something, that as I progressed, it was going to lead me more and more to the right. But he saw something.
It was the questions you were asking, and here you are, ended up. So at some point, you ended up running for office as a conservative.
Yes. Well, as a registered Republican, but I did the first time get the conservative endorsement, which was interesting, because I later found out that you want to talk about identity politics. Me and my running mate at the time, who happened to be a Black woman, we both got the conservative endorsement when we ran that first time for city council. And it was amusing, because we both realized after that, when it came to the conservatives especially, they put us forward because we were running in a city, by the way, where Democrats outnumbered Republicans nearly 4-1. So I think for them, ironically enough, for those conservatives that pushed us to run and endorsed us, it was the fact that they were looking, well, we've got two Republicans, one's a gay man and one's a Black woman, and this is a city that's so blue, right? That's deep blue, that this is probably one of our best shots. And but they got mad at me pretty quickly. During my first campaign, they got mad at me because my husband is a private man. I did not want him in pictures. I did not want any of that. I respected. I didn't talk about being gay. And ironically, it upset some of the people. They wanted me to play that up, that I'm a homosexual man running as a Republican, and I didn't. If I was asked about it by a reporter, I'd be like, yes, I am married. My husband and I, we've been living in this city for this long and all that stuff. But I didn't dwell on it. I wasn't holding a pride flag at any point.
Yeah.
I wasn't doing any of that stuff. I wanted to talk about the issues.
I really loathe when conservatives use identity politics and play those games. I obviously hate it when liberals do it. But we're over here saying we have to stop doing that and stop dividing people, and then we do have conservatives playing those games. I mean, I loathe it to the point where earlier this year, Donald Trump put out some presidential proclamation about Irish Heritage Month, and I'm like, stop it, enough. We don't need Irish this, Black that, women's this. Enough. Like, I don't want my government in my culture and in my life. Just run the show and let us live our lives with as little infringement as possible. So it upsets me to that extent where I'm part Irish. It's not like I got anything against the Irishmen, I am one.
I was going to say, have you watched House of Guinness yet? No. No, but there's actually a lot of great Irish movies and shows out there, at least rooted in Irish heritage. They're quite good, actually. It's because y'all just drink and fight. No, but
vengeance is the name of
exactly.
The game. Yeah.
So Elena, you're going to find this interesting because that was my first run for office. My second run for office probably ended any desire I have to ever run for office, or at least locally again. And this was interesting because this is when I started affiliating myself with, at the time, Gays Against Groomers, right? And they actually wanted to endorse me, which one of the final moments for me was my detachment from the quote unquote community. The LGBTQIA plus blah, blah, blah community, right? There was so much that I put up with as they became increasingly unhinged. But once they started targeting children and female spaces, once that became a center point of everything, because those individuals were always on the fringes. They were always there on the fringes, and we told them to F off when I was younger. I remember that. Those types who were like, get the F out of here. Go. Right? But they took over. And, I'd actually have to say that, if the closest I could come to having a regret is that when I got to a place where, legal protections for two consenting adults of the same sex were accomplished, right? When that was accomplished, right? Whether it was civil unions that were equal in protections to marriages or whatever, I wanted those legal protections so that when the man I loved was in the hospital, or if I was in the hospital, our families couldn't challenge and take it away, right? That if one of us passed away, because I had experienced older gay men that they had gone through all the legal documentation, right? To become each other's proxies, to become each other's, inheritors of states and all that stuff, right? But I spoke to a number of them who still lost everything because the family came in and managed to get a judge that had a very specific moral view of homosexuality and ruled in favor of the family over the spouse. So that's why those legal protections were so crucial for me personally, and I will never regret fighting for them. What I do have that little touch of regret for is I wish on my way out that I and others had worked to destroy the movement, to just burn it to the ground, so insulted that earth so that nothing could follow after. I truly, in my heart, wish we had done that.
That's all you needed, right?
Yeah.
That was it. We needed our rights so that we had legal protections for our partnership, for our marriage. And we don't, that's where it went haywire because it was accomplished. The big thing was done. And a lot of people stayed and needed to still feel useful. So they found a new victim, and that was in transgenderism. And they felt, in my opinion, like they didn't have big enough numbers. They were on the fringe. So they wanted to build an army, and they started with the children. That is how I see it.
And it's not unique. That's the thing, Elena. It's not unique. When you look back at different movements, right? When you look back at the civil rights movement, right? how did we get to BLM? The insanity of BLM is because the movement didn't end when it should have. It didn't disperse when it should have. When you look at modern feminism and how insane it is to where men are now women, and the insanity, ironically, the patriarchy has won in feminism.
I know. I thought that the I hate all men phase was the peak of the horribleness on the feminist movement, but no, now it's all the men can come into the locker room and the ladies' room as long as they've got a dress on. Like,
I do love the irony that we got to a point where, and when I talk to, because I've talked to some actual female feminists, right, who support this, and I'm like, you don't see the irony that the patriarchy, to a degree, there in feminism has won, because even you yourself support men being apparently better women than women, and I'm like, I'm like, you gotta appreciate the irony a little bit. You gotta come on, even a little bit of a giggle there. that you will throw your weight behind a man trying to take whether it be a trophy or a place in the locker room from a woman. You will throw your full weight behind a man trying to accomplish that. Do you not see the irony in that? The twisted irony in that?
And what do you get for a response?
Usually if it's on social media, I get blocked, or a swearing and then blocked, called transphobic, which is one of my favorites. Or if it's in person, I get yelled at and screamed, and and I've had that only a couple times. I've actually been fortunate. Like, some people, when they've confronted this psychotic leftist culture, they've gotten physically assaulted. Right, I've had threats, especially when I go undercover at Pride. I've definitely had threats. I've even made videos where I've shown the screenshots, which are quite entertaining. I've had lawsuits threatened against me. I know we covered that once, actually. But at the end of the day, when I have had some engagements, one of the times though where I think I might have hit a nerve is when there's silence. Because sometimes I'll have that engagement with a woman and it will just be silence. And there's been a few times where it's been in person and I just see her go silent, and it's like I can see the gears. I can see that her mind is working to make that connection. The irony is, she is this, I am woman, hear me roar. I need a man like a fish needs a bicycle. She is all that, yet she is here fighting for a man to be able to take a trophy from a woman. And I can see the conflict. I can actually see it. And it makes me think of, was there someone who looked at me that way and they're like, I can see your mind working.
I don't know that I would look at that and see conflict. I would look at that and see like a completely unplugged brain.
Yeah. Well, let me give you another example, though.
Each person is different. Maybe you can see the wheels turning on some people, but a lot of these people, when I see them making these arguments, they are just completely checked out. Like their brain has turned to mush. The logic, it doesn't even register on so many levels.
But Elena, I don't know if you've had the privilege to experience this, but have you ever seen in person, watched two identities for a leftist conflict right in front of them? I had an opportunity with a former friend. I was there when he, when he proposed to his, now ex-husband, because, it makes sense why that ended. But like, I was there in his house. We all hung out. It was one of those kind of friendships, right? We had heard about a gay bashing near us. A gay man had been beaten very severely, right? He was all up in arms. He was like, we need to march. He was really like, because we were activists. Now, he actually did identify as a leftist. Because that's around the time when leftists was starting to come in, that term, and he owned it. I was still identifying as a liberal or even an SJW, but he was identifying as a leftist. And he's like, we need to do something, right? Then the identity of the attacker came out. And I actually was there when he found out. the identity of the attacker, and it caused this. I really saw. I saw the sparks. Like it was. I swear. So what it turned out to be was the gay man happened to be a white man. The attacker happened to be a black man. So it was a black heterosexual man beating a homosexual man, white man, and he suddenly was like, well, we need to find out more details. And I was like, okay, now we need to find out more details. Now we need to step back and get all the details before we make a judgment here. And it was one of the most entertaining experiences of my journey from the left to the right.
See that they can't see that bias, that extreme bias that they accuse us of, that they absolutely can't see. Had it been like a good old boy, a good old white boy from the South, then that again makes all Christians, all white boys from the South, everybody, you can just paint everyone with a broad brush. I remember talking to a leftist friend about up in Boston, and she just would just say the crappiest things about Christians right to my face. And I was, Christian. And I would say, I just don't think it's nice to paint an entire group of people with the same brush. I mean, there's good and bad in all people, in all groups of people. And she would just wouldn't relent, just wouldn't back off of it. And I think it was gross. And I'm not friends with her anymore. Nothing ever happened. I just got really turned off. And before that, she was a nice lady. We hung out. We were friends. We were part of like a friend group. And it's not that same moment of conflict that you're talking about, but just this commitment to hating groups of people that is so much stronger on the left than it is on the right. Yeah. And it's very sad.
Yeah, and I'm not one of those people. I acknowledge when there is hate on the right. But Absolutely. The irony to this is, and this is interesting. Most of the most aggressive critics of the left that I know, where some of them have, in my opinion, crossed bounds that I'm not going to cross because I feel that makes me a reflection of the left, have actually been people who were once on the left and they were so scorned by that experience that they just want to see the left completely fall, which to me, I want to see leftist ideology. I do. I want to defeat it in the culture. But I'm not, I will never be out there promoting the violence, because here's one of the truths and one of the facts. Once you're able, there's a reason. And I know, a few people have said this, that, they don't attack us because we're Nazis. They call us Nazis so they can attack us.
Yes.
And that is what the left does. That is where the left is, because, and this does apply on the right to a degree though, because if you can dehumanize the opposition, if you can dehumanize an individual or a group in your mind, you can then justify the most horrific things being done to them, right? Yes. We saw that with Charlie Kirk, obviously, our most notable example, the assassination of Charlie Kirk. God rest his soul. That I think highlighted that mentality, that truth in our culture, is that we now have entire groups of people who have demonized other groups of people to the point where they genuinely don't even see them as truly human anymore. So then they can now justify doing the worst things to them.
That's right. Yes, absolutely. That's exactly what they're doing. They're the dehumanization of, conservatives is actually really sad. I mean, even again, though, they don't see the conflict. Look at the Virginia governor's race. Oh. So, you've got on the left, you've got Abigail Spanberger, who is, a white woman. And on the right, you've got Winsome Sears, who is a black woman. And the white woman who is going to scream about, promoting DEI and affirmative action and all those things is the thing that is trying to stand in front of the black woman becoming the first, black female governor of the state. If she really cared about her values, she would step aside and let her win.
I know, right? And what
Yeah.
happened with Obama, right? Obama was telling black men that if they don't vote for the black woman, Kamala, then, basically doing a Biden, you ain't black. But now, who's he saying they should vote for? Who is he saying those black men should vote for? Is he saying they should vote for the black woman? Nah, he's not going to say that, is he? No, he needs to vote. You need to vote for the white woman that if she had black hair, she could play Snow White. That's how white this woman is, right? That's who you need to vote for, not the black woman. That it's wild. It's absolute insanity. Now with Winsome though, because I know you liked the one post I shared. I know it's a few months old, but I shared it recently of that protester with the sign.
Yes.
Which I don't remember it word for word, but it basically was to Winsome. It was saying, if you won't let trans people use your bathroom, you can't drink from my fountain.
Yes.
What this was, I was like, this person created this. My response was Democrats fully returning to their roots. That is, I mean, they're not even hiding it anymore. They're like, no, we're fully owning those roots.
They've completely lost their minds. I mean, it's just hate for the sake of hate at this point. And we see it with Trump. I say it all the time. Trump could cure cancer, and they would accuse him of eliminating healthcare jobs. They or it just doesn't matter what he does and what they do. They hate us. They hate him. Anyway, before we wrap up, so we've gone through this journey from you being very liberal, whatever label we want to put on it, to being politically homeless for a few minutes there, and then finally, I just want to ask, like, what was the moment when you finally decided? Because somewhere in 2019, you made the decision to change your registration. Was there a particular moment that you can remember that you finally said, okay, this is it. I'm going to go and I'm going to register as a Republican?
Like I said,
I know it was a bunch of stuff, but there had to be the final
stuff. But here's what it was. I had a bunch of those small experiences on a small, like that one guy messaging me, right? But his was from 2020. His came after. But I had like tiny examples of that with people. And as I kept having those encounters, right? Whether it was in a Facebook group or whatever, I started to reflect on my values. And I remember one day I just kind of sat back and I was like, let me just put my values in front of me, right? Let me just put my values in front of me. I am now unapologetically pro-life. Even in cases of grape and, related affairs, let me put it that way. I am against abortion. I believe in the sanctity of life. That's why it's life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness, right? Life comes first, despite what Kamala says. Life comes first because you can't have liberty, right to happiness without life. You need your life first before you can have those things, right? Life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness. So I'm unapologetically pro-life. I am fiercely pro-Second Amendment. So much to the point where I don't even support, where for example, and this is where I get into it with even conservatives now, people on the right. I don't even support gun legislation when it comes to necessarily mental health or stuff like that, or if someone was once in jail. And here's why: is because if we think this person is still so dangerous that they can't own a weapon, why are we letting them back into society?
Yeah, that's a good point.
Why? If we think this too, because they could hurt anyone with anything. We've seen people use knives. We saw that on a subway not too long ago, right? We have examples of people doing vicious, brutal things that do not involve guns. So my view now is, and that was also another transformative moment for me, was if we think this person is too violent to own a gun, then why are we allowing them in society? Just saying.
Right.
So,
and if there was any question, I'd rather know that they had a gun than just have them get one on the street. And as far as the mental health, I completely agree with you, because I don't want the government in the business of telling me what's going on in my head, because I do not trust their judgment, because that depends on who's in office. on how the rules go. And oh, you were depressed last year for 2 hours. Sorry, I saw your Facebook post that said you were sad. We think you might be going to use this for something bad. Absolutely not. They'll use social credit scores against us. I couldn't agree with you more.
Exactly. So that right, pro-life, pro-Second Amendment, right? I'm for free speech. Hate speech is just speech you say you hate. It has no legal bearing whatsoever, right? So I'm you can say all you want all day. Now, if you call for violence, that's different, obviously, right? But if you so-called hate speech, that's protected speech. So there, pro-life, Second Amendment, hate speech. And as I was starting to feel a spiritual path coming on, all this stuff came to a head in around that time in 2019. And I put my values before me. And I was like, when I looked at the parties, I was like, I might not always fit perfectly with the Republicans, but why the heck am I still a Democrat? Because it just didn't make sense.
Yeah.
And like I said, I'm in a closed party state, right? A closed primary state. So I want a say in the primary. So I looked at the parties and I was like, all right, I'm going to be a Republican, which locally, one more thing I want to tell you the story because I started it. My last run for office as a Republican resulted in the Republican who was running for mayor disavowing me as a candidate on the ticket with him. Why? Because I joined Gays Against Groomers. I wanted to be endorsed by Gays Against Groomers, and I started speaking out against children being exposed to drag. And I had Republicans telling me that's not an issue, a local issue. That's not this, that's not that. Really? Well, following that, when I did drop, I stepped away from the race. I stepped away from the race and pursued Gays Against Groomers at the time. And here's the thing, right? I ended up exposing drag story time hours locally, exposing stuff happening at Pride. We covered it with you, Chris, and I have. So I actually have gone back to some of those individuals and I was like, how dare you try to say this wasn't happening locally, that I was focusing on a non-issue. I had Republicans. Here I am. I am the former leftist homosexual man calling out this, and I have lifelong Republicans telling me that I need to stop focusing on drag story time and children at Pride and all that. And I was like, you gotta be kidding me. How the heck are you, a lifelong Republican conservative, telling me that I need to stop focusing on this stuff? Where's your mind?
I wonder. I can't help but wonder if it wasn't a values conflict, that it was just a straight up denial thing. Because you know how I deal with the talking to people about the sexually explicit books that are in school. Some of them are, gender bending, pushing that, but a lot of them are just, straight hetero filth, erotica. And I tell people about it, and all the time, well, that's not happening in my school. Those books aren't in my school until I show them what's in their school. And even then they'll say, well, the kids don't even know that they're there. I'm like, well, but it's okay. It's okay to have Playboy on the shelf in the school library. You don't mind that. So, but they deny that's their first thing. So in that case, it sounds to me like they were probably just like, just not even believing that it was really happening, that it was some obscure case that happened in San Francisco or Portland or something. And, and here we are. And there are still people in denial, Chris, to this, Evan, to this day, there are still people denying that these drag stuff, that the gender stuff is in schools, and it's still very pervasive and then the other half of the people that knew about it think that it's solved because Trump is in office, and it's absolutely not.
Yeah, and that's the funny thing is I'm always honest. I'm like, Trump is not as conservative as I would like him to be, that's for sure. But what's interesting about that, right? So that's another amusing thing. I went from despising Trump, and I'll be honest, I was comparing him to Hitler and all that stuff, right? To where Trump is not on many issues remotely conservative enough for me. So
I,
it's been a very another thing to highlight that interesting journey for me. But to speak to what you were talking about there, Elena, and I know we've talked about this before, right? It's a process with the left, right? First they say it's not happening, right? Then you point out that it's happening, and then, well, it's not happening a lot. Then as it increases, you point out that it is happening a lot, and they say, oh, well, that's okay that it's happening. It's actually good that it's happening a lot. And if you don't support it, you're a bigot. So that's how they slowly, and I'm going to be honest, that's how they infect society. I'm not even going to say groom. I'm not even going to say shift. That's how they infect society, right? One cancer cell develops and they just nurture that and then it spreads.
yes.
Like they say, it's only one cancer cell. No problem. Oh no, there is no cancer. That's first. There is no cancer.
There is
It's
no
only one cancer cell and it's in the toe. It's in the toe. It's in the toe. You're good. Oh, now it's through the whole body and in the bones and in the brain. But that's good. It's good cancer. It's a good cancer. It's the good kind. Get out of here with that.
Yeah. 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 No, you're absolutely right. That is the path. And we're seeing it with every single issue that we have been screaming about, no matter what, children, not children, all of it. Well, I just want to again congratulate you on snapping out of it. And if you hadn't, there's no way you and I would have ever met at that Gays Against Groomers event.
Yeah, and speaking of that, I want to quickly give a shout out to Chris Barrett, my co-host on KC Reacts Live, because if it wasn't for him sitting us next to each other, we wouldn't have engaged either, actually.
I know.
It was Chris that had us sit together, and he's like, I intentionally put you two together because I thought you guys would hit it off. So
Yeah,
thank you, Chris, for that.
You on purpose. And I have it was very loud in the room, so the sound isn't great, but we could make it out. Like, I think I have like an hour-long recording of the very first conversation you and I ever had. And one day when we get together, we should sit down and watch that just for.
Absolutely. I'd love to do that.
And I mean, if the sound is good enough, maybe I can maybe we can, do a stream on it, because that would be fun to relive that conversation.
Absolutely.
Never get like, when do you ever get that first conversation that you met somebody? That would be cool. All right. Well, thank you. Thank you for coming tonight and sharing this story. And I know some of it, for somebody else might be embarrassing, and you're not embarrassed. You're just saying, like, this is part of my journey. And I think, that helped. Hopefully somebody else will hear it and say, yeah, I'm having these same questions. And this is this is the common theme that we hear with everyone, with detransitioners. We hear people who have left the left. It was like, at first, it was like, a lot of them say, like, I started to have questions, but I was afraid to ask them, because when I did ask somebody, they got mad at me. So I backed off. And then little by little, the questions just became too strong. And I had to start seeking outside and looking, for answers elsewhere, because I couldn't get them inside. And then the people rejected me, and then it turned into war. And now I'm finally at peace again. And again, and again, here, one of the big things is I used to be a victim, and now I'm not. And that's the most beautiful part of people leaving. Isn't just that they now agree with conservatives and are, we got another one on the team. It's seeing the light come back in their eyes.
Absolutely. It's such a freeing thing. And the thing is like, I remember, to go back to that post I made in 2016, I just remember always being consumed by anger. Even during my happiest moments, it came back to anger and rage. And I was always looking for the person who was going to try to attack me, the person who was going to try to oppress me. That was always in the back of my mind. And I can say, I thank God for the blessing that is the escape, that was the escape from that mindset, because that mindset is poison. It is poison to the soul. That's what that is. It is poison to the soul. So find the antidote, whatever form that antidote takes. And, if someone on the left is watching this and I am angering you right now, okay. I mean, I know I'm angering you, but I still encourage you to please watch, if you see a little bit of your path, a little bit of your story in my story, take a moment to think about it. That's all I ask. I'm not asking you to shift everything. I'm just asking you to step back and really consider everything and where you are in life and stuff. And, if this helps just even one person, then to me, it's worth it at the end of the day. So,
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you. I hope so. I hope we get at least one. Save them from all the darkness. All right. Well, thank you very much. As always, this was a great pleasure.
yeah.
And to everyone who watched tonight, wait, before we go, where can they find you?
All right. So, my friend Chris Barrett and we have KC Reacts Live. That is our podcast, our stream. You can find us on Apple. YouTube is where that's where we first started. We have it now set up where it is at KC Reacts Live. I have my own channel, which is The Issues from Left to Right. The 2 in that is the number 2, not the word 2, because I need to be special at the time. So once again, The Issues from Left to Right. You can find me on Instagram, which I always forget. It's at khammer, if I remember correctly. I need to write them down so I have them right in front of me. I have some, a few. And I'm khammer one on X. I keep wanting to say Twitter to this day. So you can find me all over the place, but first and foremost, go to KC Reacts Live to find me there.
All right, good. Yeah, I dead name Twitter all the time. It's fine. All right, yeah, and for those of you watching, there are some links. If you're watching on YouTube or Rumble, there are some links in the description, so we can always find you. All right, well, and again, drop a sub if you like this show. Like it, comment. What's up?
One correction, because in the comments I just saw someone say KC Reacts Live as in the name. No, it's KC as in the letter K and the letter C. It stands for Kevin and Chris Reacts Live. So it's called KC Reacts Live. Thank you for actually making that comment, because that would have been other than the link.
For the future, you to remember to say it like that. Actually, I hadn't looked at the comments, and I want to just thank you, Sunny Soundbites, for coming by tonight. Thank you. I see you made a couple of points. I'm sorry I missed them. Thank you again, everybody. Have a good night. God bless you. God bless.
God bless.
Good night.
Good night.